Have you ever heard of Hogback Distillery? Well, the other day I got the opportunity to go out and visit Graeme Wallace with Hogback Distillery and hear his story. Hi, I am the Colorado Whiskey Guy. It is my mission to introduce the world to Colorado whiskey. Like this gem here is Hogback Distillery from Boulder, Colorado. But more than the distillery, I got a chance to sit down and talk with Graeme Wallace, who's a Scotsman who has an astounding story and a great vision for his little distillery. So I can't wait to introduce you folks and hear exactly what his plans are to making the best whiskey.
So I had the good fortune today to meet up with Graeme from Hogback Distillery, and they just happen to be bottling some of their product here today. So Graeme, can you tell me what you're bottling today?
This is a rye whiskey, so it's a 95% rye, 4-year-old whiskey.
So you bottle everything on your own then?
Pretty much, yeah. Between myself and Catherine, it's almost a one-man show, two-man show.
Two-person show.
Yeah. We're what I call truly micro. So you got craft, which how big or how small is craft, but micro is small.
Micro distillery, I understand. So how many products do you have?
Good question. I think it's 8.
8. That's awesome.
Pretty sure it's 8.
That's awesome for a micro distillery.
Yeah. I think it's good to have a range of products. Some people just stick to bourbon. Some people like to try a rye. Some people are interested in malt whiskeys. So
Absolutely.
try to satisfy everybody.
Totally.
Something for everybody.
So I think a lot of people are very familiar with your bourbons. So is that really what you're concentrating on, is the bourbon, or what's your passion for Hogback?
My original idea was to make single malt whiskey in line with Scotland. And the goal, rather ambitiously, was to be one of the top single malt whiskey producers in America. Not in the world. If I can be in the top league in the US, which it's a relatively small field, that was the ambition, and still is. So single malt is very much what I'm all about. We do the bourbons and the ryes because we're in America, and most people, as a percentage, are drinking bourbons. So the bourbon pays the bills.
Absolutely. So what is your most popular product?
The number one selling product is the Oak and Aspen bourbon. That's a bourbon that's been aged for 4 years and then finished with aspen wood. So by adding the aspen wood, it softens the whiskey out a little bit, adds a little bit of a softness and sweetness, makes it a very, very easy whiskey to drink. So it's proved to be by far our top seller for the time being. But once the single malt whiskies come on stream, then hopefully that will become our number one seller.
So I got the chance today to come down to Hogback Distillery and meet with Graeme Wallace. Graeme, thank you very much for having me out here.
Sure, no problem.
So, want to know a little bit more about you. Tell me, how did you get into whiskey?
Well, that's a long story. I've always had an interest in whiskey since about the age of 25, and I'm now 59, so it's many, many years. And it just gradually grew from enjoying the drink to writing about whiskey. So I started a publishing business over 20 years ago. I was writing about different Scottish subjects. One of those subjects was Scotch whiskey. So I published numerous books on Scotch whiskey and got more and more into it. Started publishing a drinks magazine. I just was, like so many people, fascinated by the variety of whiskies and the whole romance around making whiskey. Then about 6 years ago, I decided that maybe I would start buying barrels of whiskey and bottling them as an independent bottler. And so I came to Colorado, there was about 80 distilleries in Colorado at the time, and the idea was to buy barrels of whiskey from those craft distilleries in Colorado. That didn't finally pan out. So as an alternative, I thought, well, I guess I'll just go make it myself. So no master plan to this. It was a way of me being able to come to the US.
Awesome.
Started this.
That's awesome. And so you kind of touched on that. How did you end up starting Hogback Distillery?
So as I say, I'd been in the whiskey world in Scotland for a long time. The idea of starting a distillery in Scotland was not a non-starter. Scotch whiskey has to be in the barrel for at least 3 years. It really doesn't really come of age until 6-7 years, so that's a long time to wait. In the US, you can call it whiskey after a day. It's not necessarily ready to drink unless you're after moonshine, but there is no wait period. So starting a distillery in Colorado seemed a lot easier than actually starting in Scotland, even though it was on the other side of the world. I had a friend who lived locally here to Boulder, and we talked about him being involved, and so that was the idea, that we would start this together. He had a full-time job and just couldn't make the commitment that was needed, so I went ahead and did it on my own, with his help, but nonetheless to get up and running. So yeah, that's how we got started.
That's awesome. Now, so what is your overall goal for Hogback Distillery, your mission?
My goal is to be seen as one of the top distilleries in America making malt whiskey, or American single malt whiskey, which we hope it will eventually be termed. That's not an official term at the moment. The term is simply malt whiskey. But a number of other craft distilleries are pushing for a new category called American single malt whiskey. My goal is to be one of the top single malt whiskey producers in the US. Not one of the biggest. I will always be small, but making arguably the best malt whiskey. That is subjective, but that's the ambition.
Simple goal.
Simple goal. Say to be a major producer would be harder than making good whiskey. I don't think it's that difficult to make good whiskey if you have the right ingredients and the right equipment.
So does Colorado provide the right environment ingredients?
Sure. I mean, Scotland is known for great whiskey based on its water. Colorado equally has great water. That's the you can make great whiskey anywhere. And the water standing here, I don't think there's anything else that I would say is unique to Colorado to make it a better place to make malt whiskey than anywhere. Certainly the environment and the conditions that are here, the big fluctuations in temperatures create a unique style of whiskey, but you can make great whiskey anywhere. So I chose Colorado more because I wanted to live in Colorado, and Colorado is known as being a great state for whiskey drinkers.
Absolutely. Now, some people know, but not everybody. Can you tell folks how aging whiskey in Colorado is different from, say, Scotland?
Sure. There's two major factors in how whiskey will mature differently here to in Scotland. The first is the conditions. So when the spirit comes off the still, it's put straight into a barrel. Immediately it will interact with the barrel. It will draw colour out of the barrel, so the whiskey when it comes off the still is clear. So it's changing from being a clear spirit to a brown spirit. That's simply drawing colour out of the wood. It's also drawing flavours out of the wood. So most whiskey is matured in American oak, and that imparts vanillas and caramels and some tannins. So it's imparting various flavours. The whiskey is absorbing that. So that's the second thing. The third thing that happens is the whiskey seeps into the wood and then back out, in, out. And in doing so, it's mellowing. The wood is mellowing the whiskey. So time has a factor. So by speeding up the time, which is what's happening here in Colorado, because the bigger fluctuations in temperature causes the pores in the barrel to open up more and contract more during a 24-hour cycle. That interaction with the wood is happening quicker, which in one sense is a good thing because it's drawing out that flavors and those colors. But you also don't want this to happen too quick because whiskey needs time. So in Scotland, all their barrels are used barrels. The temperature's cool. The warehouses are almost constant temperature without any temperature control. So the whiskey is interacting with the wood at a very, very slow rate. Here in Colorado in particular, that interaction is happening quicker. It's good that it's speeded up. I'm sure in Scotland they would like things to be speeded up a little bit, but you don't want to rush. You can't rush it too much. So hopefully we've got a good balance here. As I say, about 90% of the whiskey the malt whiskey that we've filled into barrels are used barrels. We have filled new barrels as an experiment initially. Very, very pleased with that experiment, and as a result, we're filling more new barrels now. It means that we've got a whiskey that's going to taste very different to whiskey that's been in the new barrel, used barrel. But it does mean that we have a whiskey that is very pleasant to drink at 3 years rather than 5 years.
Awesome. So, Graeme, actually, Hogback Distillery just won an award for one of their whiskeys. Can you tell me which one of your products actually ended up winning that award?
Absolutely. My goal of being one of the leading producers of single malt whiskey in America may seem ambitious, but I feel that we've gotten off to a very, very promising start with this award that we've just won. It's the first competition we've entered, and we submitted a malt whiskey, which was non-peated. Most of our whiskey is peated, but this was a non-peated whiskey. It was filled into a new oak barrel as opposed to a used barrel. And it was filled at cask strength, so about 63 ABV, 125 proof. We submitted that. It was our first barrel we ever filled, and I'm pleased to say that we won the category of Best American Single Malt Whiskey Single Barrel, which means it's one barrel rather than the vatting of barrels together. So a great start, absolutely thrilled. So it's the first release of this malt whiskey. We bottled it under what I call the Wallace collection. My name being Wallace, named it after myself. Each expression of that Wallace release will be a single barrel. It will always be malt whiskey, maybe peated, it may be not peated. It'll always be cask strength. It'll be our best whiskey, so if we're not thrilled by it, it won't be selected to go to that.
Hogback Distillery has a total of 8 different products, including their rye whiskey, their bourbons, their finished whiskeys, and their malt whiskey. But since Graeme's passion is the malt whiskey, I asked him a little bit more detail about his single malt and about how he makes that.
So how many times a year are you able to distill?
I try to compress it into about 2-3 months of the year, believe it or not. So at the moment I'm shipping over 18 tons of barley from Scotland, and that'll take 2-3 months to distill. That's probably enough for a year and a half's worth of whiskey as far as filling barrels. So I compress it all into a short window of time, then I can put my time onto other things like trying to sell the whiskey, bottling. There's always a job to do.
And how long has your malt been sitting in the barrel so far?
So as far as the malt whiskey is concerned, 90% of that goes into used barrels, 10% is filled into new barrels. The new barrels generally are getting bottled, the little bit that I've bottled so far, after 3 to 4 years. The used barrels is 4, 5, 6 years. And we've only been distilling for 4.5 years, so who knows how long it's going to stay in that barrel. It would be nice if we can get whiskey staying in the barrel for 10 years. The nice thing about filling used barrels is the whiskey's not absorbing so much of the flavor from the wood as it would from a new barrel. So it can sit in the barrel for longer without becoming dominated by the character of the wood.
Over oaks and all that.
Yeah.
So are you doing peated malt or just regular malt or?
Both. It's about 90% peated. I'm making whiskey based on what I like to drink. If I like it, hopefully there'll be other people that like it. I've always been a fan of the peated malts, but not just that flavor of the peat. I want some fruit and other characters as well. But certainly some peat character to the whiskey, I think, really adds something special, something interesting. And so 90% of what I'm making is peated, and pretty heavily peated too.
So like a kind of a Isla kind of peat, or more of a island?
I would definitely call it an Isla style of whiskey, but it depends on what you mean by Isla styles. Isla is a small island on Scotland, or off Scotland. It makes a whole range of styles of whiskey. Some are super peaty and phenolic. Others are no peat at all. So not all whiskey from Isla is peated. But Isla is known for its peated styles. I say they have a range. So I would definitely say that, yes, I'm making a similar style of whiskey to what they're doing in Scotland. However, the peat used for malting my barley does not come from Isla. It comes from the mainland. So the vegetation is going to be a little bit different. So it's similar to Isla, but it's not, maybe not necessarily an Isla style as you would think. I like to think more in line with the Talisker, which is an island, but it's not from Isla.
Well, that's all we have for today, but a humongous thank you to Hogback Distillery and to Graeme Wallace for having us out today. And thank you for watching. So if you'd like to know more about Hogback or one of their products, feel free to check out this video here. But until the next time, I'll see you later. Cheers.